Hey everyone, it's Petticoat from Daydream Nation, and I've got Reed Little back to the channel. How are you, Reed?
I'm doing great, Peter. Thank you for the invitation. This is going to be a fascinating chat, I think.
It is indeed. We are talking about a particular genre of music that I'm not very familiar with, but I dived deep into, and this show is called This is Doom Metal. So we have chosen two albums each from two completely different bands. So in total, four. And we're going to do a little bit of a mini review of the four bands and four albums. A bit of a cross section of the doom metal. As I said, I'm not really familiar with doom metal. What about you, Mr. Little?
All right, so my depending on how you define doom metal, and anybody who's going to spend time watching two guys talk about music probably understands this concept. But genres do not happen organically; they are assigned names by marketing departments. So Black Sabbath had no idea they were a heavy metal band. They had no idea that they were creating doom metal or stoner metal or goth, and they created all three of those things. Um, so it wasn't until much, much later that people started talking about doom metal as a thing. And in the 80s, we never used the term doom metal, ever. Even if a band was kind of Sabbathy, although very few bands were kind of Sabbathy, and we can talk about that too. But I really got into it in the 90s. More doomy bands started coming out. And in fact, depending on how broadly you cast your net, you can consider even bands like Alice in Chains are a little doomy. They're very Sabbath influenced. Corrosion of Conformity came out with their album Deliverance. It was very doomy. I loved that album. Loved Wise Blood, their next album, even more. Um, and I've kind of followed off and on since then, but it's really only in the last 3 or 4 years that I've done a deep dive. And I usually say I've done a very wide dive rather than a very deep dive, because I've listened to a broad spectrum of doom metal, but I rarely buy like the entire catalog of any specific band, except for the Obsessed, who are my favorite doom metal band, and I'm not even talking about them today.
Very good. Well, I think I had some awareness of the term doom metal, and I think it was referred to in the 80s. There were two bands, which incidentally I will be covering, St. Vitus and Candlemass, that I had an awareness of the name and the association with this genre of music, doom metal, but I hadn't heard any of their material. So this is a bit of a discovery and a fascinating one at that. So let's get cracking. Let's go to
Sure.
you, Reed. What is the first band that you nominate and the album that you'd like to have a bit of a chat about?
Sure. So this is kind of a hybrid album, but when you talk about doom metal, this is one of the earliest that comes up. It's from 1982. That is Death Penalty by the British group Witchfinder General. Now, they only put out two albums back in the day, Death Penalty and Friends of Hell. They are probably most famous for the reason that I'm using my finger to cover a piece of this album cover. They used a page 3 model that was apparently a friend of the band's. She's topless. It got them a lot of publicity. They say that any publicity is good publicity, but if that's the only publicity your album's getting, that's probably not very good. So this band had no penetration in the US whatsoever. I don't think the album was ever pushed over to the US. I can tell you that album cover would not have flown anywhere in the US in 1982. They'd have had to sell it in a plain brown wrapper. So that was always going to be a problem. But when I finally picked up this CD, not out of interest in doom metal, but because I was trying to pick up CDs from the new wave of British heavy metal. And I listened to it and went, "Oh my God, this is one of the best unsung doom albums I've ever heard." And then after that, I started noticing various people that are in the Doom community referring to Witchfinder General as one of the big early Doom acts. But if you hear or see people talking about the big four, you know, that term unfortunately became really popular when Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Metallica did a tour together. And again, it's just marketing, but now everybody attaches, there's a big four of whatever. And the big four of doom metal are Saint Vitus, Candlemass, Pentagram, and oh my gosh, Trouble. I'm talking about Trouble, and I forgot them. But this album is as much new wave of British heavy metal as it is Black Sabbath in influence. And I know there's always a discussion with people over whether there is actually an NWOBHM sound. And I always say that there is, because for the same way that if you listen to thrash metal records, this is going to come up again when we talk about Trouble. If you listen to the early Metal Blade albums, if you listen to the early Megaforce albums, they have a sound. And if you listen to those early new wave of British heavy metal albums, they all have a sound. And unfortunately, that sound is cheapness. They were on small labels. They didn't have a lot of money. They were recorded, in this case, Martin Popoff on his book on the NWOBHM has a pretty decent discussion of how these various albums that were produced by Heavy Metal Records were created. Many of them were recorded in the owner's house, and the productions are not good. The playing can be fantastic. The songs can be good, but the productions are terrible. They didn't know how to get a good sound. They didn't spend any money on it. They didn't have money for marketing. And they sound like it. But I will say that of all the Doom bands I've listened to, again, just going with the definition that Doom is kind of Black Sabbath-y, Witchfinder General sound more like Black Sabbath than any other Doom band I've listened to. Now, what makes the difference is they're not Master of Reality era Black Sabbath. And this has always been kind of weird to me as a Sabbath fan. When Doom people talk about the influence of Black Sabbath, they go to the album Master of Reality. And that's because it's got a lot of doomy songs on it. It's got a lot of doomy material lyrically. It's tuned down. You know, a guitar is normally tuned to where the low note is an E. Tony was tuned down to a C sharp. So he's tuned way down. All the instruments are tuned way down. And a lot of modern doom metal is very tuned down. But I say Black Sabbath created the entire genre of doom metal with 3 notes. The first 3 notes in the very first song on their very first album is doom metal. Doom metal never got out of that paradigm. And just like Black Sabbath, doom metal does not have to be slow. That is something that people perceive. And Witchfinder General, there are some songs on here that might as well be like on the debut Iron Maiden album or the debut Angel Witch album. They're really up-tempo. But the guitar, I'm so bad with names. I've already forgotten the poor guitarist's name. Pope? Maybe? Cope. Phil Cope. He sounds so much like Tony Iommi. It's crazy. And the songs can be kind of catchy. They're usually not. The singer has a decent voice. Getting a good vocal tone is very difficult on a recording. And on cheap records, the vocalist always sounds particularly cheap. And his tonality isn't offensive except on one song, but they don't get a good sound with him. There is a song on the album called Burning a Sinner, which is jokingly referred to as Burning a Singer by people. And it has a terrible vocal performance. And probably I think it was an early single at this time. The singles market was huge in Britain, the new wave of British heavy metal existed for the singles market. America did not participate in the singles market. So not to that extent anyway. But there are some really great songs on here. Witchfinder General, which is about, that's why I'm wearing my Vincent Price shirt. Vincent Price was Matthew Hopkins, the Witchfinder General, a character that also appears later on Cathedral's album in the song Matthew Hopkins, Witchfinder General. So witches and witchy imagery show up in doom metal a lot. There is one song called No Stayer, which I'm not fond of. I love the instruments on it, but the lyrics are really juvenile about this guy who's just going out to have sex. And I mean, when I say juvenile, I mean, they read like you might have written it when you were 13 years old. And it just it's such a drag compared to the rest of the album. You look at it and go, why didn't somebody tell him that this was a bad idea? And the thing I think is really funny is No Stayer has parts that sound very much like Manowar's song Fast Taker, which came out on their album Battle Hymns the exact same year. So No Stayer, Fast Taker, I just think it's funny. It's one of those bizarre coincidences. Also, they've got a song called Free Country, which is all about psychedelic drugs. Now, you usually don't hear Witchfinder General talked about as a stoner band, but song lyrics that were openly about taking psychedelic drugs are not common in heavy metal, at least until you get much later and you're talking about bands like Sleep and true stoner bands. So it's an interesting hodgepodge. It's got great guitars, great riffs. What I have learned over the years of my years of not being a drum appreciator is that really the guy you can't replace on those early Sabbath albums is Bill Ward. Even with good guitar players, the drumming is never up to Bill Ward's standard on those early Sabbath albums. And Witchfinder General used a succession of studio drummers. They apparently had a hard time filling that drummer slot on a permanent basis. But both albums, Death Penalty, the second album is called Friends of Hell. They are both very worth listening to if you like Sabbath-related music or the new wave of British heavy metal. And of course, it's perfect if you like both.
Thanks, Reed. Just a couple of observations. I agree with you. I think the debut of Black Sabbath, the self-titled, is the start of doom metal. That is the template. I think Masters of Reality, and I said that in our ranking show, is the genesis of stoner rock. I find that much more of a stoner rock album, not doom. Although the bands that I'm covering in today's show, there are echoes and references and indexing of that era of Black Sabbath, and maybe even a little bit deeper into it. Question to you, Witchfinder, do you think that if they had a different album cover, it would have sold more units? It may have been, got into the mainstream a little bit more. It's regrettable that such a juvenile album cover kind of probably sort of stunted their, getting out into the marketplace.
I don't think so. And I mean, this is kind of the story of the new wave of British heavy metal writ large. The only bands that you can really say had lasting success are Iron Maiden and Def Leppard, and they got picked up very quickly and went to international distribution. But the bands that were on Bronze Records or Stiff or this album was on HM, Heavy Metal Records. And again, if you look in Martin's book, there are lots and lots and lots of negative allegations made against the guy who who owned HM Records. And without a better distribution deal, they were simply never going to be successful regardless of their album cover. So who knows? That did provide them almost all of the notoriety they have, which is sad, but they wouldn't have had any without that. They'd be another, praying mantis.
Absolutely. So I guess if you're a young kid or a teenager, you're going through the heavy metal vinyl bin and you come across that, you go, oh, look at this. So it's eye-catching, but maybe for the wrong reasons. Interesting. Thanks for that. I'm going to start off with one of the sort of foundation doom metal bands, I believe. The band is Candlemass, and the album is Epicus Doomicus Metallicus from 1986. A Swedish band. This has only 6 songs, very influential, and it sort of aligns with what you were saying, Reed. The production sounds very garagey. Doesn't sound like it's a very top-notch production. It's a bit cheap sounding. And to me, to my ears, how you gravitate to this album rests with the vocals, because musically it falls into that Black Sabbath DNA of the first album. Very down-tuned, doomy, sludgy riffs. On average, the pace of the album is glacial with a little bit of mid-pace it goes into, maybe a little bit of a double kick on the drums, wah-wah guitars, but predominantly, I guess, to me and my ears, was how I sort of bought into this album is how I dealt with the vocalist. Now, the vocalist's name is Johan Langvist. He's the vocalist, and he's a very operatic type singer. And he takes all these different type character voices. One moment he'll do a Rob Halford scream or two. He has a very unusual vibrato. And another point I agree with you. Yeah, I'm agreeing with you today, Reed, is that I think the production, the cheap production, probably brings out the worst of the vocals. If he had a top-notch studio producer, it could have molded it and refined it into something that was a little bit palatable. Listening to this album across the 6 songs, I don't mind the musicology side of it, but it's the vocalist that grates on me. And I think we've had many discussions over many shows. The vocalist is key, isn't it, Reed? If you don't buy into the vocalist, it can be hard to get past that.
Yeah, the vocalist is really, I think for almost everybody, the vocalist is the most important part of a band.
Yeah. He overplays his hand in a lot of these songs. So I get a sense with doom music, there's a lot of theatrical, and he's playing it, he's overplaying his hand, that a lot of the topics are about mortality, death, solitude, and he's really playing up to the campy hammer horror side of things. And to me, that kind of detracts from the music, detracts from the whole experience. Even when there are quieter moments and there might be a little bit of an acoustic bit, he overplays it. He just pushes it, ramps it up to the power of 10, where he could just hold it back. So everything is just ramped up way too much. But look, let's talk about some of the songs, because there's not that many. I mean, the first one is called Solitude, and it starts off with acoustic guitar and the Gothic organ. And you've got lyrics, "I'm sitting here alone in darkness, waiting to be free, lonely and forlorn. I am crying." That really sums up doom metal. Death, mortality, please let me die in solitude. And then the Iommi style down-tune riff and the tribal drums. The band perfectly replicate Iommi and Ward, but that Black Sabbath, that first Black Sabbath album, and the song Black Sabbath. Dinosaur Sabbath-like riff, and it just bludgeons away. Then we've got Demon's Gate, got a demonic voice that starts off the song, a simple drum rhythm, and you've got a sludgy power chord riff from the band. A lot of tritones all across the board. So if you like your tritone riffs, this is the album for you. A little bit of a gypto chords as well. This is an epic song. Vocals, again, very operatic. it's an acquired taste. That's, you know, how far you buy into the song. Then you've got Crystal Ball, a low bludgeon riff. It's like a stomp counterpointed by Langvis's operatic vocal gymnastics. Drums are simple and just drive the song along with a little subtle fills. Blackstone Wilder, this picks up the pace a bit for the majority. It's a mid-pace rocker, plays with some different time signatures. Very heavy, gnarly riff. Under the Oak, the song, this is an epic track, but it's underdone by some cheap sounding production. And then the final song, A Sorcerer's Pledge, the lyrics, 1,000 years of midnight, the sunrise is gone. It starts off acoustic, and it's a moment that, you know, there can be subtlety, but I think in this genre of music, subtlety is not the go, Reed, and the singer just cannot play it straight. It still has that operatic, histrionic vibe. Changes tempo, has a bit of maiden gallop rock. The double kick comes in and some nice high notes at the end. So 6 songs, 42 minutes, 51 seconds. The jury's out. Musically, I like it. I dig it because I dig the first Sabbath album. I love those early Sabbath albums, but it's the vocalists, and I think vocalists is key. And if I can't lock into the singer, then I don't buy in. Are you familiar with this album?
I am. I own it. I enjoy it, actually. I was kind of surprised when I bought it. I really expected the singer to sound like King Diamond. If you look at the album cover, you know, Epicus, Doomicus, Metallicus, I mean, I was just thinking this is going to be like a Merciful Fate. You know, he's going to be singing high falsetto. And the fact that he didn't was a pleasant surprise to me. But other than that, you're right, he is very over the top. It's an over the top vocal performance. This is probably the album that gave doom metal its name. You know, Black Sabbath used the term doom on Hand of Doom, on Paranoid. That's probably the first association with the term. I was going to say one of the things that makes doom metal is that it has to be doomy of subject matter, not of sound. I compare it to the blues. You can have a blues, which is a 3-chord organization played in a specific way, usually in a pattern of 8, 12, or 16 bars. But if you're going to have the blues, your song has to be about the blues. Well, if you're going to have doom metal can sound like a lot of things. It can be fast, it can be slow, it can be down-tuned, it can be standard tuning. But if it's not about doomy subjects, then it's not really doom.
Of course, 100%. But with the singer, I think that because the production's cheap, they probably, the economics were they didn't have a lot of time, room to maneuver and do lots of takes. If this was done in a proper studio with a little bit more money, a bit more coin, maybe if you had a canny producer that could have worked with the vocalists and did it a number of times, because I get the feel that this may have been 1 or 2 takes, because this guy has got a very unusual vibrato. Right. And I feel like he's kind of trying to work it out as the album goes along. And if you don't have a lot of time to play with and you don't have the room to do multiple takes, it's kind of an opportunity lost. So if you're only doing 2 takes on vocals, 6 songs, you haven't got that much time to develop and work on it. And I just find that this guy's vocals are ripe. I don't mind ripe vocals, and, you know, certain genres of music like power metal, you know, that's part of course. But in this doom thing, I understand he's trying to create something hammer horror, but it just goes on the cheese level a little bit, because I just think the vibrato, it's just too much.
I think one characteristic of doom metal specifically is it takes itself deadly seriously. So if you're going to do an over-the-top performance, there has to be a little bit of a sense of humor to it. If you're over the top and deadly serious, then that's where you get into the camp and cheese. But I have not ever listened to any other Candlemass albums. I will at some point, but as of now, that's the only one I have. So I don't know if he got better later.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's the first taste. What's your next pick?
Okay, so going back to one of the big four, we're going to talk about Trouble and their first album, which was actually a self-titled album, but it was later retitled as Psalm 9, as is Psalm Psalm in the book of the Bible. So this album came out in 1984. I don't have a physical copy of this one to hold up. They are from Chicago. And again, it is Sabbath influenced, but this is clearly not a band that were attempting to sound like Black Sabbath. I think they sound a lot like, frankly, like a lot of the other metal that was going on in 1984. It doesn't sound a million miles different than Metallica's Ride the Lightning. It doesn't sound a million miles different than Annihilator's Alice in Hell. I meant to look up when Alice in Hell came out, and I did not. So I don't know if that was before this came out or not. But nonetheless, the fact that it was Sabbathy very much set it apart, because at this time, thrash, what was formerly and very briefly known as speed metal, were really the heavy metal musics that were taking over the scene. There weren't a lot of traditional metal bands left, like Queensryche or Dio. You know, hair metal hadn't quite kicked in yet. That was still, I mean, it was rising in popularity, but it didn't rule yet in 1984. So I think what you actually get is a pretty standard heavy metal album, but it does have a lot of doomy elements. Now, for me, and we get back to the singer, the weak link on this album for me is Eric Wagner, or perhaps Wagner, who is now deceased, died, I think, in, oh, no, I don't remember, 2021. It's just been a few years. It was relatively recent. But I don't like his singing voice. Ironically, there's on the track Psalm 9, he narrates some things in his speaking voice. I think his speaking voice is great. If he had done something that was in a much more, speaking voice range, he would have sounded great. But his tonality, I don't like. And there's something about his voice. I was listening to it and going, this reminds me of something. It reminds me of some other singer. Who does it remind me of? It kind of reminds me a little bit of early James Hetfield. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Annihilator's first singer, a man whose name I've never bothered to look up. Sorry about that, dude. Doing you a disservice. But after we watched the Back to the Beginning show, it struck me who I think Eric Wagner sounds like. And this is one. Feel free to flame me in the comments. I think he sounds like Axl Rose.
What? Seriously? You mean late period or early period?
Late period. I think he sounds like Axl sounded on that live show.
Oh, you're kidding.
That's my take on it. And
helium,
again,
that helium type of Mickey Mouse.
It's because
grabbing at high notes.
Oh. He's singing up in his head voice, and he's using too much vibrato, and it's I don't like it. But ironically, again, I love the music. I think the music sounds great. Now, there are a couple of songs. They had a single. It cracks me up when American heavy metal bands put out singles. Who was going to buy those? If you were going to buy a heavy metal band, you bought the album, not an individual single. I know somebody's going to put on, oh, I own all those singles. Good for you, man. I hope you enjoy them. But their first single was Assassin, a song that doesn't sound anything like any of the rest of the material on the album. It's a very straightforward 1984 proto thrash metal song. And they have a song called Bastards Will Pay, which again, very 1984 metal. But then you get The Fall of Lucifer, Victim of the Insane, The Tempter. All of those are very doomy. And the doom elements, the Tony Iommi worship really comes in during the instrumental breakdowns. Every one of these songs has a spot where it's just the guitar player. And when that kicks in, when it's just the guitar player, it's pure Sabbath. And they're not at this point in their career. I don't know in any other Trouble albums, so I don't know how they were later, but on this album, their compositions are not very sophisticated. So they slow down. They'll do like halftime, and then they go to regular time. So not exactly prog metal type constructions of the songs, but it does give it a little extra oral interest. But I particularly love the track Revelation, Life or Death. It's got a very Black Sabbath riff, but it's got a harmonized guitar. They did have two guitarists in the band, although I have no idea if, it might have just been one guy playing the twice or whatever. But it is fantastic, but it makes the same mistake that all of this is fresh in my mind because of that Back to the Beginning show that War Pigs makes, where you have a weak singer singing over nothing. And he's hanging out there and you're going, he sounds okay as long as the guitars are backing him up. But when it's just him, and I know, you know what, he had a fan base. A lot of people loved his vocals. And if you loved his vocal style, man, more power to you. I'm not the taste police, love what you love. But for me, I do not like his vocals, but I love the music of the band. And they have on the CD version, or I think I got it from Bandcamp, they have a cover of Cream's Tales of Brave Ulysses, which is a great cover. And I think it really helps draw that connection between Cream and heavy metal, because Cream were not a heavy metal band in any sense of the word, but they definitely inspired heavy metal bands. And Tony Iommi, Eddie Van Halen, Fast Eddie Clark from Motorhead, they all loved Eric Clapton. And sometimes you go, why did these heavy metal guys love Eric Clapton? But if you listen to a song like Tales of Brave Ulysses, it reminds you of that connection. And like I said, it's a pretty good cover. Although I'm glad that it was a bonus track and not one of the core tracks of the album. But all in all, Trouble, Psalm 9, really good. Not that slow, but it has some really slower, doomy parts in it. I don't care for the vocals, but a pretty strong debut album.
Yeah, thanks, Reed. Well, there you go. The vocalist is key. So very important in respect of your buy-in to the material. If the vocalist is, if you don't sort of connect with the vocalist, it's very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, indeed.
Saint Vitus, American doom metal, formed in 1978. They are one of the foundation doom metal bands, along with Candlemass, Pentagram, and Trouble. I'm going to cover them. Now, when I put in my Amazon order, because I'm a newbie to this is all fresh ears, and it's all part of the experience. I was anticipating I would get the 1984 debut, the first album. Instead, I got the 2019. And you know what? I don't mind. It's great because it gives a bit of a perspective. We have covered a lot of the old doom. Now we're covering an album that's right back into the later part of their catalog. This album has top-notch production. The production is great. Very bass and bottom end heavy. And, I see a lot of different influences. Black Sabbath is definitely key. That first album, the song Black Sabbath, I hear it. It prevails all through the 9 songs. However, there is a bit more to it. I hear a little bit of Iggy and the Stooges. There's a lot of wah-wah pedal. The guitarist, Dave Chandler, he loves putting the foot on the pedal and putting out a little bit of feedback and wah-wah. And I hear Williamson out of Iggy and the Stooges. I love it. It's great. A little bit of garage rock. A lot of Iommi cribbing. Tony Iommi, definitely. And Henry Vaquez on drums. Bill Ward's. He's got a lot of the Bill Ward drum fills to perfection. Now, the big question, the $1 million question is the vocals. And the vocalist is Scott Regers. I like his vocals. I really do. He is like a combination of Ian Astbury, the Cult, with a little bit of Jim Morrison. It's baritone, it's operatic, but it's interesting and it's tuneful. And maybe it's because they've had a producer on this album working on his vocals and getting it into something that is more colourful, more of a palette than, some of the other vocalists in this sort of genre of music. The thing that I like about this album, Reed, is that whereas Candlemass, I found it was kind of narrow, this has a broader palette. So if they're being inspired by Sabbath, they're not just being inspired by the first album, they're looking at the catalogue. There's a lot of time signature changes. Maybe we're looking at Bloody Sabbath. We're looking at Iggy and the Stooges. For God's sakes, their last song, and I think it's a little bit of a piss take and a little bit of a nudge and a wink, the song Useless, 1 minute 32, they go hardcore punk rock. I think it's like waking up so you got the headphones on and you're listening to all this doom metal and suddenly it's it's like a mosh song right at the end. It's like a putting a little bit, wake up. But getting back to the vocals, I like his vocals. He tries different character voices. It's tuneful. It works with the material. It provides a bit of drama. But I hear a lot of Ian Astbury and Jim Morrison. So let's talk about the songs. Remains, that's the first one. Cracker, 6 minute 23, fuzz chords, down tune, crisp drum fills, intro. Then it goes into the tritone riff. Tritone is king. Those 3 damn chords. But it's interesting. And then halfway through the song, the vocals get more expressive, and then there's a little bit of Stooges guitar pedal. The second one, a prelude to, Regers does this ominous gothic vocal croon over the band going really quiet. Bass does the quiet run riff, guitars are low in the mix, drum, hi-hat lightly played, real close to the mic stuff. Regers can croon. He's got a really decent voice. Whereas with Candlemass, I hate to compare, I don't know if this guy's got a good vocal or not, because he just doesn't play it straight. This guy can play it straight when the material requires it. Bloodshed, gnarly sped up stone rock riff. 12 Years in the Tomb. Starts off with a Children of the Grave vibe, up-tempo. Vocals are like a character growl. Drumming is breakneck. Wormhole, hungry zombie looking for a meal. So there's a lot of gothic hammer horror, a lot of George A. Romero type material. You listen to this song and you feel like you can, if this had a video clip, you could see the human metamorphosing into a zombie, and it's like Dawn of the Dead. It's if you love your horror movies, this is like a soundtrack to a horror movie. It's a lot of fun. Hourglass sound starts off like a slow metal waltz, then kind of goes stoner rock. There's a bit of stoner rock in this, and the lead singer, he gets bluesy. Yes, you heard that right, folks. Bluesy. The tone. So that's why I'm really gravitating to this album so far. City Park, it's just 4 minutes of night noises. No minimal instrumentation. You got crickets, a bit of bass guitar, and then The Last Breath, which is probably the finale to the album. This is the album's Black Sabbath. It takes its time. It's got the drama, the doom, all wrapped up with glacial chord changes. And then it goes up tempo, speeds up, and the wah pedal comes out. And then, as I said before, you had that little bonus track, Useless, which is a bit of a to the listener, wake up.
Right.
Are you familiar with this album?
Not that one, no. The only St. Vitus album I have is Born Too Late, which I got because for a while the main man from The Obsessed, Scott Wino Weinrich, was their lead singer. And honestly, I think it's kind of boring. I vastly prefer The Obsessed.
Yeah. Well, this is my first album. I'm definitely going to explore their catalog and go back, and be interesting to hear the original St. Vitus album of 1984. But this is a cracker of an album. And, you know, it's got great production. It's very crisp. The instrumentation, separation of instruments is wonderful. But it's got more variety. It's a palette. It hasn't got that narrow. We've got to, you know, there's a certain checklist that you've got to tick. They're expanding the boundaries, and I'd say this is predominantly doom. But if you had a pie chart, there's some other genres of music thrown in. I like the Iggy and the Stooges, the wah wah, and putting a bit of feedback. It's an interesting one. So I recommend it. I recommend this one.
There's definitely more colors to Doom now. Many more elements. And of course, if you get into all of the subgenre, which I'm just going to name a few. I'm not an expert in any of these, but
nor am I.
You know, desert rock, of course, stoner, sludge, drone metal. Drone metal cracks me up. The only song my wife has ever asked me to actually turn off was a Sun O song. If you've never heard of Sun O, they do these big, long, droning songs. And she pokes her head and was like, "Can you listen to anything that's not that?" And she's put up with a lot over the years, and she's not a heavy metal fan. But I like a lot of them. I don't like all of them. Like, you know, Electric Wizard is real famous in the stoner and doom community. They're okay. I will say the modern albums sound so much better. Even inexpensive productions are simply light years better in terms of their ability to get a good sound compared to what, you know, people had with low budgets in the 1980s. So
yeah,
I think that's a big selling point.
Absolutely. And by default, I mean, for today's show, I got a nice contrast between this, which is old school, cheap production, and something, an established band with really good production. And, as a listening experience, much more enjoyable.
Right. And it's Doom is apparently more popular than ever. There are a lot of Doom related YouTube channels. So you're starting to see that content be out there, whereas it was very much a very, very small subgenre inside heavy metal. I think it's picking up steam.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Reed. We might do this again. We might explore some more Doom bands, but, very enjoyable chat, just covering 4 albums, 4 different bands in the genre of doom metal. Folks, tell me what your favorite doom metal bands are, what albums. I'm a newbie, so recommendations are welcome. Please like and subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Lots of different content. We cover a lot of different genres of rock. And, over the last couple of weeks, a bit of a Black Sabbath theme. A few other shows around the family of Black Sabbath. And I say, even though, none of these bands are related to Black Sabbath, they've definitely been influenced by Black Sabbath. So check out some of the other shows that Reed and I have done, especially the Last Word on Black Sabbath. That's got some interesting comments, Reed, so far.
I'm sure that's true.
Reed can be seen on the Contrarians. Please check that out. One thing's for sure, you'll see me and Reed doing more shows in 2025 and beyond. Rock on, cheers, and all the best. See ya.
Cheers.